The trees whispered secrets in the wind, and the path was empty. I felt it before I saw it, a chill that clung to my skin, and a silence too heavy to be natural. But there it was, the place people warned me about, the Silent Manor. No one dared step near it. They said it had a mind of its own, that it lured people in and never let them out the same. Old villagers whispered tales of strange occurrences, families disappearing, and shadows that moved when no one was around. And for years it stood there, silent and brooding, waiting for the curious, the foolish, and the lost. But tonight I wasn't alone. Behind me, Matt and Jason trailed cautiously, their eyes darting around as if the trees themselves might come alive. None of us were particularly brave, but we were driven by a strange curiosity. For years, stories had surrounded the manor, tales that kept us up as children, our minds racing with nightmares. But there was one story that stood out, a legend that whispered of an old diary hidden within the house, one that supposedly held secrets about the manor's past, and if the legends were true, the way to escape it. The gate creaked as we pushed it open, and the manor loomed out over us, its windows dark like eyes peering down. The door, covered in peeling paint, opened with an unsettling groan as if it had been waiting for us. The air inside was cold, thick with dust and memories. We stood in the hallway, flashlights sweeping the room. Shadows clung to every corner, and the floorboards beneath us creaked as if protesting our presence. The walls were lined with faded portraits, their eyes watching us with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. It felt as if the house was breathing, inhaling our fear and exhaling its darkness. Jason pointed to a staircase that spiraled up, winding into the unknown. The diary, he whispered, his voice barely audible. It's supposed to be in the attic. Without a word, we started up the stairs, the silence pressing down on us. Each step echoed like a heartbeat, louder and louder, as if the house itself was alive. And as we climbed it, I noticed something odd. The portraits on the walls, they seemed to be changing. Faces that were once expressionless now looked twisted, mouths open as if screaming. I didn't dare tell the others. I didn't want to admit I was already terrified. At the top of the stairs, a long corridor stretched before us, doors lining each side. But it was the last door on the left that drew us in, a door slightly ajar with a strange red light seeping from within. We entered the room, our flashlights scanning the walls. Papers and old books lay scattered on the floor, and on a dusty desk by the window sat an old, leather-bound diary. It looked ancient, as if it hadn't been touched for years. I reached for it, but the moment my fingers brushed against the cover, a cold, tingling sensation shot through me, and the room shifted. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with a life of their own. A soft whisper filled the room, a faint voice calling from somewhere in the house. Help me, I looked at Jason and Matt, but their faces were pale frozen. They heard it too. With shaking hands, I opened the diary, flipping through brittle pages filled with faded ink. And as I read, the story of the manor began to unfold. Eleanor Grace, she was the last to live here, a young woman with a tragic past. She had inherited the manor after her parents mysteriously vanished. The diary spoke of her descent into loneliness and madness, her nights filled with strange noises, shadows that seemed to move, and voices that whispered her name. She tried to escape, but each time she left, she would find herself back in the house, trapped in a never-ending nightmare. One night, Eleanor discovered a hidden room in the attic, a room that didn't exist on any map, one that seemed to appear only in the dead of night. Inside, she found something horrifying, an old mirror with cracks running through it, and within those cracks, she saw her own reflection, twisted and distorted as if it had a mind of its own. The diary ended abruptly with a final entry that sent chills down my spine. To anyone who finds this, beware. The mirror holds the key, but if you look too closely, it will take something from you that you can never get back. A shiver ran down my spine as I closed the diary. Matt's face was pale, and Jason swallowed hard. None of us spoke, but we all knew we had to go to the attic. The door to the attic creaked as we pushed it open, revealing a room covered in dust with cobwebs hanging like curtains. And there, at the far end, stood the mirror. It was large with an ornate frame that seemed to pulse as if it were alive. The cracks ran through it like veins, and within the shattered glass, shadows seemed to move. The air around it was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Jason stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch it. Don't, I whispered, but it was too late. His fingers brushed the glass, and the room plunged into darkness. When the lights flickered back on, Jason was gone. Only his reflection remained in the mirror, staring back at us with wide, terrified eyes. He was pounding on the glass from the other side, his mouth moving as if screaming, but we couldn't hear him. Matt and I backed away, horror gripping us as Jason's reflection twisted, his face contorting, turning pale and gaunt. And then, just as suddenly, his image vanished, leaving only the cracked mirror and our own terrified faces staring back at us. I looked at Matt, his face as white as a ghost. "We have to get out," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Now." But as we turned to leave, the door slammed shut, trapping us inside. The mirror began to glow, casting a red light that filled the room. Shadows stretched from the glass, creeping toward us, wrapping around us like fingers. In a desperate attempt, I grabbed the diary, flipping to the last page, hoping for some kind of answer. And there, written in hurried, shaky handwriting, was a message I hadn't seen before. "The only way out, surrender a soul. One must stay or the mirror will take you all." My heart raced as I looked at Matt. He had read the message too, and the fear in his eyes mirrored my own. "No, we can't," he stammered, backing away, but the shadows were closing in, and I knew we had no choice. Either one of us stayed, or we would both be trapped forever. I looked at the mirror, at the shadows twisting within it, and took a step forward. But before I could move any further, Matt grabbed my arm, his grip tight and desperate. I'll stay," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I saw the terror in his eyes, the reluctance, but he took another step toward the mirror. "Matt, no." I tried to pull him back, but he shook his head, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Tell them what happened here. Don't let them forget." And with that, he reached out, touching the mirror surface. The shadows wrapped around him, pulling him into the glass, and in an instant, he was gone. His reflection lingered for a moment, his face peaceful, and then it too faded, leaving only the cracked mirror and an empty room. I stumbled down the stairs, my mind numb, my heart heavy. As I stepped out of the manor, the first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon. But the manor's silence felt different now, as if it had been sated, as if it no longer needed anything from me. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the manor was still waiting, still hungry. And I knew that one day, someone else would be drawn to its dark secrets, to the story hidden within the shadows. Because some stories never end, some stories are waiting to be told again.